Hello, my name is Cindella Walters, and this presentation is for my Business Communication Strategies class, Professor pending Dr. Pudlowski. And this is based upon a presentation that I recently gave at San Luis Obispo Child Support Services. Now, what I would like to do is show a few slides and see how they relate to the techniques given to us through Jerry Weissman's book called Presenting to Win. We will look at particular slides and then see how these techniques have been applied or even what might be best to change. Now, on this slide, even though it's not actually our second slide, it's our third slide, the slide before this just showed our source information for the training. But this is our third slide, and this is where what's in it for you comes into play. We will present the learning objectives, and we're using animation here where each of the objectives show up one by one. Now, normally, we would not use so many wordings on this slide. The screen was big enough so that these words were visible. Normally, we don't use white background because that can be hard for people to see. What I did to counteract that is I gave them participant guides with this information in it. Now, also, I know that my professor advised us not to use cartoons or clip art, and photographs would be better. So to sort of offset that, I did at the beginning warn the audience that the theme for this is superheroes. And once they understood that, they would understand the purpose of using cartoons in the video. So I did ask for their forgiveness in the beginning. Now this is the third slide I presented, the buzz about EI. They did enjoy seeing Buzz Lightyear there, and it brought some laughs, but it also set the tone for the presentation. Even though it was informative, we wanted to keep it somewhat lighthearted to keep their attention, but not so that they feel as though the full presentation was about entertaining them. So this did break the ice per se, where we got a few laughters, and again, it looks as though there's a lot of verbiage on the slide, but the animation we used in pulling it up one by one was very successful in that they did not see a crowded slide all at one time. Now this slide is to give the audience an idea of how the brain works. Now each of these arrows do appear with each click, and with each arrow I explain that specific item. Now Mr. Weissman says that we should not have our audience think. And so even though some of these things that we are introducing may seem familiar, and it may be some items that they've already know, we cannot make the assumption that they know it. So we go step by step. And this illustration, I think, was very clean. It catches the eye, and it's memorable. Also, again, they have this information in the participant guides that we created for them. I did not tell them each page to go to, but at the beginning of the class, I did let them know that every slide is in their participant guide for them to go over, not as a text per se, but for them to refer back to and even take notes if they wish. Now this slide indicates our first discussion. Now I had never been in the room before, in this room that we used for this presentation before, and it was very cramped quarters. Normally at this time I would have them go into groups and work together, but this was not possible. So what I did is I used the flip chart and we just did the group assignment together. What we did is we listed all of Superman's strengths on a T-chart, and then on another chart I asked the audience again for all of his weaknesses. Then I asked them, does he have more strengths than weaknesses? And of course they say yes. And then I say, how effective would Superman be if he did not know what his weakness was? And of course, kryptonite was on there as one of his weaknesses. And so I told a story of Superman walking around wearing an amulet given to him by his good friend Lex Luthor, wondering why he couldn't fly, or wondering why he couldn't move fast. And so all of his strengths are overshadowed or diminished because he's not aware of his weakness. So because it was a 2-hour training, I wanted them to move their eyes away from the PowerPoint to reduce eye fatigue. Now this slide I would have done differently, maybe place the information on 2 slides, because it's just too full. It just has too much information and it causes the text to be small. So this is something that I would redo and just go ahead and put it on 2 separate slides, so that especially people in the back would not have to strain. Also in Mr. Weissman's book, he suggests using note pages or the note features on the PowerPoint. I don't, simply because I don't want to be referring to my notes. So I do look to the screen to help me pinpoint where I'm at, but I don't read the information. I speak to the title. For example, I would say self-control, and then speak on self-control and let them read about managing disruptive emotions and impulses, but I don't read each bullet point. Now, because we were discussing emotional intelligence, I thought it was important to, or permissible, to show a video that had strong emotional content in it, but it also allowed me to bring home the point. Now, this scene, which unfortunately I can't show, but you can find it on YouTube. It's called The Death Crawl, and it was a part of the movie, which I think is terrific, called Facing the Giants. I really enjoy this movie. It's a Christian-based movie. The actors, most of them were from a church group, and the scene, even though I was not giving a religious message, it does talk about faith. It does mention or brings home the fact that we are not bound by what we see, and that if we believe, we can do what seems to be the impossible. So, Dr. Pudlowski, I hope that if you have not seen it yet, that you will pull up the YouTube video, Facing the Giants, especially the scene called The Death Crawl. It invoked a lot of emotions in the class, and that's what I wanted, because so that we can talk about emotions and how emotions really are a gift. And I believe that they are a gift from God. I believe that God is an emotional God. He can be angry, he can be disappointed, but more than anything, he is loving. Okay, so after having shown that powerful video, a few slides later, we are talking about recognizing emotions in others. So when the slide appears, it's only the title, Recognizing Others' Emotions. But it gives me the chance to give a personal story. Again, linking the audience with the presenter on an emotional level instead, or also. And so here, recognizing others comes up, and I tell the story of how I was at Cedars-Sinai Hospital to visit a friend years ago. I step in the elevator, and I see this gentleman, and then I turn and I face the doors to the elevator. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is that Steven Seagal? I turn and I look at him, and sure enough, it's Steven Seagal. When I tell the story, this chart, I click, and this chart slowly rolls up, and the audience sees this Steven Seagal emotions chart. I say then, if I had this chart then I would have understood that Steven Seagal was lonely in that elevator based upon this chart, and I would have befriended him. That produces a good laugh for the audience, and those who might have been a little bit emotional from seeing the scene, this sort of breaks it up and lightens the mood a little bit more. Okay, so now this is the second to the last slide, and here we encapsulate everything that we have talked about. This is a picture of Superman made of Legos. I think he's about 8 feet tall, and he was featured recently at a Comic-Con convention. Now, The last activity that the group had is they were shown a picture of a single Lego, and I asked them to give me all the uses of a single Lego. I was able to ask them to work in groups, just to come together, but maybe four to a group, and we received really funny and enlightening comments on how to use a single Lego. So after each team gave me or reported their list of a use for a single Lego, this slide appears, and I first asked them, using in working together in a group, did you find that you can better get ideas by working in a group than if you were to do it on your own? And inevitably, they all said they came up with better ideas than if they were to do it on their own. And so I bring up this slide to make my final point in that if we all put our Legos together, if we all put our best together, then we are superheroes for the clients and especially the children we serve. This is my final slide. I took a risk, or I do take a risk when I use this slide because it does have very strong spiritual undertones, and I have to be careful because I do work in a government setting. But I use this slide, I read it to them, but I make sure I use emphasis and that I pause and that I use a proper tone. I make sure I'm not monotone because I understand that it's really risky to read to your audience, but I made an exception because I wanted to bring emphasis to certain words. They are, I think, appreciative of this poem. Again, it is in their participant guide, and I think it brings together the message that I want to send. I do treat my training as ministry, perhaps not overtly, but I hope that every time I give a message, I leave the Spirit of God in that room. This is my final slide, and this is where I thank the audience for their participation and their attention. Even though I gave the information that the training would be 2 hours, I do understand that most adults cannot sit through a training for 2 hours, but I always pad my time a little bit, and this presentation ended at about 1 hour and 40 minutes. I wanted to give time in case someone did have questions, but I feel that I should always leave some time on the table. They often treat that as a gift. So the final result, we hit it out the ballpark. The response was tremendous. Several people came up to me after the presentation and were moved and said that this is something that they would take with them. Even though emotional intelligence was penned by different psychologists, and emphasized by Dr. Daniel Goleman, I believe that it's biblical principles that were there from the beginning, and man just put his own spin to it. But this is the scripture that I follow that helps me to be more emotional intelligent. It says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. And that's Philippians 4 and 8. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. This is my final slide, and this is where I thank the audience for